Special Operations Training Detachment, SOT-D West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center.
Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Spencer, Mike, and Andrew, the leadership of a Psychological Operations Detachment, a Civil Affairs Team, and a Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha. They just recently conducted a rotation at the National Training Center conducting opposing force operations. If you haven't listened to part 1, go check that out and learn about the difference between Blue SOF, REDSOF, and building the cross-functional team. In this part, you will hear more about the cross-functional team's approach to operations, developing relationships with the conventional force, and REDSOF targeting. So it sounds like you guys really embrace this cross-functional team mentality, and we're working together as the ARSOF tribes. So how did you actually, on the ground, through this rotation, integrate? Did you draw straws and go, hey, one of the captains is in charge, or did we have something like that, or was it just a completely collaborative effort?
Yeah, I think anytime that you bring everybody together, even to include, if you're doing 2 ODA missions, right?
Oh yeah.
The first thing is going, hey, who's the ground force commander? Who's in charge here, right? And not like those thoughts didn't come into our mind, but really what we realize is what's most effective, and that doesn't diminish anybody's role, is not to be like, hey, Mike, I understand that you're the team leader for the CA team. Hey, Spencer, I understand that you're in charge of the TPT, but now I am, the head honcho and you work for me. Is like, hey, let's actually look at what we're trying to get done. May I even say an intent, a commander's intent, right? And we developed that together, and we realized, hey, when we're most effective, we're creating multiple dilemmas for the enemy in the rear area as well as in the civil domain. Mm-hmm. So as long as we were doing that, we knew we were doing the right thing.
And in the informational
correct,
domain.
in the information domain, like all that. And so it was not like, hey, I gotta, go ask this other captain to go do this thing. Instead, it was much more of a collaborative, synergistic approach where we would come together and be like, all right, hey, this is what we think the ODA's doing, getting ready to do. Same thing with the CA team and the TPT. And it was like, we saw the opportunity space then. It was like, hey, actually, if the ODA does this instead of this on mission, I can have effects. You've just enabled my next move on the chessboard. And same thing with the info war as well. So I think that's the way to do it. Don't just pin, that 103 as the guy totally in charge. Make that we all got an equal spot at the table.
Yeah.
It made it a lot easier too, is we didn't have an AOB, right? We were a legit cross-functional team working together, coming together to make plans and make sure that we were meeting our desired end state. Like the effects we wanted was the mission, or how we're planning the mission. Did that achieve what we wanted? And we were our own bosses. And I think that is one thing too, is, correct me if I'm wrong, normally in the AOB, if we're doing a CFT, the CATs fall underneath the AOB, the ODAs are underneath the AOB, and then the AOB commander is the one where it's like, okay, Civil Affairs team, you can go here and do this. Yes, that is approved. ODA, you can do this. TPT, yes, you are allowed to do this. Where for us, that was on us. We didn't have that one guy in charge of us who's giving us the yes head nod or the no head nod. Mm-hmm. We came together as a team, and like Andrew just stated, we were able to see what was most effective, and did what we were trying to accomplish have effects from each 3 of the branches. And that's kind of what I hit on earlier, where without PSYOP, we wouldn't have been able to get the effects or the measure of what we were doing as effectively. They are critical in any soft CA team leader or team listening. If you are not tied in with the TPT on anything that you're doing, you are wrong. Mm-hmm. Because we would have a mission, they would amplify our mission, and we could control the narrative for 24 hours, basically a full news cycle on anything that we wanted because we were properly integrated between the two of us.
And then, like, you know, we can pivot this later in the conversation if we're looking at ARSOF and LISCO. But I think what you got here is that a cross-functional team was basically able to operate effectively and independently in a brigade-size area, right? So if we start trying to do the math on, hey, where do we want to put ODAs, CA teams, PSYOP teams, where do we want, you know, AOB and C2 at? You know, my recommendation is if you have a good cross-functional team, you can align that to a brigade-size area of operation, and they're going to be able to have a lot of effects without, kind of to Mike's point, being limited with their freedom of running up the flagpole and being like, hey, we got this thing going on, you know.
Yeah. All right. Spencer, what do you got for integration?
So I think integrating provides you opportunities to capitalize on. Like Mike was saying, the CA team came up with great ideas. The ODA team was out there conducting their mission. And if PSYOP wasn't integrated, we would have missed those opportunities to capitalize on that in the information environment and essentially degrade the BCT's freedom of maneuver, separate that civilian population from their support. So if we would have just separated ourselves, we'd have missed out on those key moments where we could have been like, yo, that's a great idea. We're going to make sure the right message gets out there at the right time to the right people so that we're causing effects on the battlefield.
Yeah. All right. Were we able to do pre-messaging and post-messaging?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, Andrew, you mentioned targeting cycle earlier in our conversation. Was there a battle rhythm event for targeting that all the tribes were participating in? Like, how did you guys do it? I've seen an ODA do it before. They were just an SF team with no CA or PSYOP. You know, they split up into working groups, COA 1, COA 2, that kind of stuff. But how did you guys manage that?
Yeah. When we were most successful, we were sticking to a daily battle rhythm of kicking off a operation and intelligence meeting every morning, breaking from that, letting that soak in, and then doing a target working group. And I think that's to your point, that's the venue, right? If you are running a O&I or a target working group, and not all three people are there and represented, you're going to miss out on the integration. And where we hit our biggest kind of like sticking points, I think was those times when we fell out of rhythm, because we also were experimenting. Hey, what's the limitation in terms of are we going to be rolling 18 deep and all sticking together, or are we missing out on opportunities to conduct split team operations if we're just doing that approach? So at least within our rotation, we were 18 deep for at least the first 4 or 5 days, and that's when the team was really, really jiving. But then we also kind of hit to a point where it's like, all right, hey, all the ODA's targets and missions are kind of down here in the south, and CA has a lot of opportunity in the north. And then in terms of just being able to develop products and disseminate them, that was kind of closer to like Task Force Reaper's headquarters. So I think we had difficulty making that call because like, man, everything's going really well when we're all together, but we're missing some opportunities here. And so we ended up going split team, but then that did come kind of at the cost of those daily battle rhythm events. But if I had to go back and do it different, we have the ability that we could have done those virtually, right? Like there's nothing saying all three of us couldn't have gotten on the horn. You can choose the platform that you need in order to manage your signature, but to have that touch point with all three, instead of just kind of like, hey, Mike's going to Spencer by himself, Spencer's going to me by himself, and we're all kind of just chasing our tail there. Like just bringing everybody together is critical. And those daily battle rhythm events, as much as I'm the guy who hates meetings, I'm like, man,
everybody does.
Yeah, I really would have liked, to have held myself accountable to like, no, hey, at 10 o'clock, no matter what I got going on, I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to get on the horn with Mike and Spence. and we're going to figure out what the next move is. And I think we got back towards that towards the end, but that was definitely a learning point in terms of, hey, let's be honest with ourselves. What's the limitation of being a bigger element versus conducting split team operations?
And that communications piece kind of goes into, I hate to say it, but technology, right? We did a very good job using everything low tech.
Okay.
We didn't use computers because our infill didn't allow it. Everything was like hand jammed on maps and acetate. But the one thing that I did find out, and hopefully the integration between the 95th and group changes this, is the tech communication piece that a team has, that a SOF CA team does not have, and that a TPT does not have. And if we had the exact same communication equipment, that would make it a lot easier, because when they're hitting their comms windows, there were times where I didn't have a way to communicate with them unless they were willing to take the risk and turn on their locally acquired cell phones, i.e. Signal.
Yeah.
And if I had the same communication equipment and we would have discovered that a little bit sooner, or like we'd hashed out a plan being like, hey, I'm bringing 163s. Oh, well, we're not using 163s. We're using Go antennas and ATACs.
Yeah.
Well, I only have one ATAC. I got it from Brigade, and it's completely locked up, that it's useless, so I'm just going to keep it in my bag.
Doesn't have the right image.
Right. Exactly. And so hopefully now with the integration, some of those friction points that we found will be ironed out and hashed out, just because now it's, hey, 10th group's my dad. Like, come on over. Like, I want a part of it, or 7th group, or whatever group you're with.
Yeah.
Like, now I have someone else who's willing to get it into the fight. But if everyone thinks the same way, hey, if we're all integrated, we all have the same stuff, look how successful we can be. And hopefully, like, we're the case study for that, because this is the first time that all three of us had worked together, and look how successful we were. Man, the problems that we were giving RTU was just incredible. So,
yeah. And that goes too for when we're looking at, SOF integrating with conventional forces, because there would be times when all of us were jiving, we knew what was going on. But I didn't have the means to communicate or battle track what the conventional force was doing. And we got through it by, doing what ARSOF does, which is developing human relationships, where it's like, I couldn't tell you how many.
So you're talking about Black Horse.
Yeah, talking specifically about Black Horse. But just developing those relationships. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I had, a PL brief into me like, hey, here's my AO, here's my engagement area. And then same thing too, really fortunate to run into some awesome company commanders out there that were like willing to help. And when too, you look at, what can we bring to the table? Morale was through the roof whenever they saw us there. I mean, it was just, it went from being like, I'm defending this city that I've defended, countless times
countless rotations.
to the ODA and the CA and PSYOP team are here. Like, I want to work a little harder. I want to get a little. I want to put my best foot forward, because like those are the dudes. So it's, to that point, like you can't miss out on the integration with the conventional forces out here too.
Awesome.
The
good point.
high-speed helmet, high-speed boot effect.
Yeah.
Whoa, there's an ops core over there. What's that? How do I get one?
Yeah.
Well, you sign up and you go to a selection and yada, yada, yada.
But to that point too, I mean, we had the opportunity when we're there. It's like, okay, hey, you guys are obviously sitting here in the same battle position you've been for 48 hours. Let me go tie in with your platoon leader and your team, your company commander, and see if we can't get you trained up on some CQB or whatever it is you're lacking at that. And then if we look at the big picture too, I mean, I think we generated like at least 8 or 9, packets that are about to be dropped after this rotation. And that's not
Sword will be happy.
Yeah,
Special
and not
operations
just
recruiting.
Yeah, no, right. But you have a responsibility when you come out to a CTC rotation to identify those people and give them the push, get over the inertia about going and seeing a recruiter or dropping a packet.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, guys going to SFAS. I mean, we have a PL who I think she was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to go to the recruiter and put in my CA packet, or, hey, I really jived with what the PSYOP team was going. So just to see that, like, they don't get exposed to that.
Yeah.
And that exposure on deployments is no longer there, right? Being like, oh man, those are the only dudes going out the wire. So that's the venue now to get the conventional force exposed and get them interested in coming over to where the grass is, I dare say, a little greener.
We had a sergeant major, and he said, always remember your ABCs, always be recruiting. And so everywhere you go, you're just trying to talk to people, and you know, it is weird because you introduce them with your first name. You're just kind of in plain clothes, carrying your rifle, and they don't know really who they're talking to, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, like I'm a civil, like SOF CA captain." They're like, "Oh, geez, sir." It's like, "Hey, like I just introduced you with my first name. You can just keep calling me Mike." Like that's completely fine. And it really does take them off guard. And they're like, "Okay, well, what do you do here?" And you just kind of sit and talk to them for 10, 15 minutes about your mission set. How are they doing? Like, hey, I've got freedom of maneuver. You don't. Like, do you need anything? And you like run them ice or whatever they help, like whatever they need. And then they're more willing to work with you too. And like Andrew said, they're excited for you to be there. That there are some other people out like in the suck with them, just trying to take care of them as best as possible. Because at the end of the day, like we enable the maneuver force, right? Like we're nothing more there to assist them as best as we possibly can to make sure that their commander is reaching his desired end state.
Good points. Both. One, always be recruiting. And two, you know, in the large scale combat, we as ARSOF are not the main effort. We are supporting or shaping operation. But
still the prettiest girl at the party, though.
Ops Corps help.
Yeah.
Instead of Patagonias or whatever the next uniform of choice will be. But going back to the integration and the targeting, like how was that targeting working group broken up? Was there just, hey, the leaders of each entity are going to represent? Or was it, I'm going to have guys by MOS, or we're going to do this by warfighting function? You know, how did you guys handle those staff processes?
From the ODA warfighting function, and then I looked at CA and PSYOPs as a intel and fires warfighting function, right?
Okay.
So in terms of the CA team, I mean, they were driving a lot of the intel that would bring follow-on targets.
Yeah,
it's like, you know, like
reconnaissance.
Hey,
and
100%. It's like, hey, I was here, here, and here. This is what's going on with the civil populace, and oh, by the way, there's also may or may not be a Q-53 like right here, and you're like, huh, all right, cool. There's the intel piece, right? And then we're identifying, you know, targets that in that target working group is like, well, do we need to have a kinetic effect against this, or is this something that we can deliver effects against with information? So, you know, if you looked at that, right, if you think of CA as another intelligence sensor, and then if you look at the TPT as a means of delivering effects, I think you got a pretty good recipe going, and it just gave all three of us options, right? I mean, I see you shaking your head, Mike. Go for it.
Yeah, no, and that's really what it is, right? We went out and did a civil reconnaissance of an area, talked to a few people, and on the way back, we saw 3-4 Bradleys cresting a hill. We made it back. We talked to Reaper, and we said, hey, did you guys know these trucks are here? And they're like, we did not know those trucks are there. And so in the next 10 minutes, they had moved battle positions just a tiny bit based off the information that I gathered while I was conducting a mission that had nothing to do with finding out where Bradleys were on the battlefield.
You're out in the environment, you just see things by
right, and you just look at. This is one thing too, is you look at the picture completely different from the foxhole that you're sitting in. So I will always look at the battle space completely different than Andrew and completely different than Spencer.
Yeah.
But because of that, if we're having these working groups, we're having these breakout sessions, we're trying to have our best possible effects. We are coming up with solutions way faster than anybody else. And I've hit this a few times because we put our pride aside, and we are all masters of our profession, willing to do the best and be a part of the team. And because of that, like, I don't know how it was from the OCTs, I'm going to pull them in, but talking to their blue counterparts, like how much faster were we at acquiring targets and having effects than blue?
For CA specifically?
All the branches together.
Yeah, so I can speak on CA specifically at least, and then Cody, maybe you can weigh in also. But again, we kind of talked it before, but it was at least 24 to 48 hours usually. You guys were that much faster than the blue CA counterparts in a lot of aspects. And again, we talked about it before. I don't know if it was just like a different mindset shift or just the team cohesion that you guys had to where different ideas are floating around. You guys are able to work together a lot better than, ODA, TPT, and CA teams working under the AOB, where it's a little bit more compartmentalized sometimes. But yeah, definitely like 24 to 48 hours is kind of what we saw and what we talked about in our sync meetings, as far as you guys were that much ahead of the curve to achieve some effects, specifically with working with some of the personas that you guys were working with out there. So
yeah, and I would say, like, not to knock on an AOB, but I think it's one more step in that process of approvals that you would have to go through that slows you down a little bit. That's what I kind of like about Red Side is, at least for the PSYOP guys, your approval process is me and Reaper. So that turnaround time for products or getting stuff out in the information environment is a lot faster, and you don't have to go through an AOB up to a SODIF to look at whatever products you're going to push out and then have that approval come back down. So I think that turnaround time of 24, 48 hours, like you're right. What I did want to say about the target working group, and I've been a part of some really good target working groups, real world, and I will say that you guys did a phenomenal job at that. That's something that I kind of get really nitpicky about every time we come out here, even on the blue AOB side. So it was really refreshing to see you guys work and get those target working groups together, and especially, sir, like your feedback coming back to the team of like, hey, you got that desired effect, right? That's what we were talking about, right on. And it was that good, like, point on point interactions that were taking place during those working groups that really, I think, made the team better as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And that's not to knock what Blue Side had going on, right? They had their own constraints too whenever you're working with a different rotational unit versus kind of us having the advantage of the people who are masters of the lay of the land. But I think the point to drive home on, and that's worth discussion for people, above our pay grades, is like, hey, if we understand that, time and opportunity is the currency of the realm, it just goes back to how much trust are we going to put kind of at that 03 level to understand the intent and make it happen versus kind of, for lack of a better example, running up the flagpole. Yep. Hey, I'm good with it. It is kind of just that mission command, like mutual trust. That guy, those guys down there, they know what I need them to do. And I got to trust that they're doing it, especially in the info war, because it's like, it sucks, but it moves so fast that if you're going to be effective, you got to take a little more risk in terms of getting something out there, even if it's not the prettiest product.
Yeah.
But if it's getting after what you need.
Let's get Spencer to chime in on how PSYOP got in the targeting process.
Yeah, so if you're not first, you're last, right? So that's what we were trying to do, is plan last 24, next 24, and stay ahead of that narrative, right? Yeah. Or create our own narrative. So as the red team, we had the advantage of having an objective of spreading disinformation, right? Which is something that the blue side isn't doing. So we could create narratives based on events that were happening that weren't true, but they were out there first. So now the ball's in your court, blue side. You have to counter that, which means you have to apply resources to that, and you have to develop the truthful narrative now. Yeah. So I think that was one of the key advantages, as well as our access to platforms, right? Whether it be print, radio, or the social media platforms, those are all sensors. Yeah. So we were able to get a scope of what was going on in the information environment, and then bring that to the targeting working group and saying, hey, we saw these were photos from the population in Nebron that they saw, military vehicles there, but they weren't getting aid fast enough, and we were able to exploit that. Yeah. So just using that as a sensor, and you'll see that today on the modern battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. If there's a civilian, they have a phone. If they have a phone, they probably have some sort of social media account that they're going to post what's going on, and we were able to capture that and apply that to what we were going to do next with our effects.
Yeah. Was it just layering all those different types of media that you're talking about, the synthetic internet, going after people's phones, the radio station, newspaper, print? Right. Just hit all of those things.
Absolutely, yeah. We wanted to layer effects, but also there were different constraints with those, like radio and newspaper. Mm-hmm. We needed a little bit more lead time to get with our contact to get it approved and paid and get it out there. As with social media, we were using personas, where we were able to get approval pretty quickly and put things out there and just start the message. And then we could layer that with a newspaper article the next day, a radio message 12 hours after that, to kind of continue that push.
Awesome.
That's one thing. And this is just Mike speaking. These are my own opinions. Take these for what you will, right? But in large-scale combat operations, it's different because you have to accept risk. You just have to accept it. You have to know bad things are going to happen because war is dangerous. War is violent. And that's a hard part that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their brain around is casualties are going to happen. And some people don't have the stomach for combat, and that's fine. But here's the deal. If you're in a leadership position, like, you need to have the stomach for risk. You need to have the stomach for combat. You need to allow the people that you have specifically and specially selected and trained for a mission to give them very limited task and purpose with a desired end state and let them be creative. Bad things might happen.
Yeah.
Like, we might push out a product that completely backfires on us, right? But you can't think through all the steps. And that 24 hours, like speed of security, right? That 24 hours to 48 hours of buffer that we had allowed us to continue to be successful. And when you trust us,
momentum's a real thing.
100%.
And when you trust us to think through these scenarios and to think through these problem sets, like, we're playing chess at these working groups. If I do this, what happens? What is the cause and effect? If I need this effect, what do I have to do to get there? We at our team level are having those conversations. And so if the commanders at whatever scale of command you're on, if you have already thought through, this is what I need these guys to do, I am going to let them off the leash and I'm going to let them do their job and know that risk is going to happen, right? Like, we're going to take casualties. But that's mine, Andrew's, and Spencer's job is, if I do this, is this mission worth losing one of my guys? If the answer is no, then I need to figure out a different way to accomplish the exact same mission.
Yeah.
Because my survivability, if you take me off the battlefield, it took me 2 years to go through my pipeline to get to where I am. Like, do we have 2 years and a fight to train another person to get to that spot? The answer is no.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Radar. Please join us next time, where you will hear Spencer, Mike, and Andrew share specific lessons learned through their experiences here at the National Training Center.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where ARSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.
Actions will determine the outcome.